This is Jeff Krisman, and I'm very joyous and tremendously grateful today to be in this space with Lorraine Goldbloom for our next installment of the Finding Present series. Lorraine, thank you so much. It's always a joy and an honor to be here with you.
Thank you, Jeff. It's good to see you. It's nice to be here, and I'm really enjoying where this series is going.
Absolutely, I am as well. It has been a wonderful journey thus far, and looking forward to it continuing. Today, we are actually going to be speaking about the subject of anxiety. And Lorraine, what I thought I might do is ask you if I could just a little bit about maybe giving a brief recap of the Finding Present series for anyone who is listening or watching that wasn't with us previously, just to kind of fill in some of the blanks and an overview. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I love to talk about it. So here we are in the Finding Presence series, and it's actually something that arose very organically. I teach something called Vortex Healing, which is a healing modality. You know, it's very functional. It's very practical on many levels. You know, it works with physical issues, emotional issues, psychological issues. And whenever I talk about vortex healing, I offer a demonstration, I offer healing. And that is really what gets people interested when they have a direct experience of something. Then they know it's for real, and then they want to, learn more. But what I found was when I was talking about vortex healing, what people really want to know is how can it help them directly? How can it help them directly with the issues they're facing at the moment? So I started sort of changing my talk structure from just sort of speaking about vortex healing to more speaking about specific issues, you know, loss and money issues and anger and what is this and how does it hold us and what does it feel like and what does that look like? And as I began to speak in that way, people really began to resonate with, oh, this is what we're working with. This is how we heal, you know, this is our, pathway through. And it also helps demonstrate that vortex healing isn't just a healing modality. When we really take on these issues and understand what these issues are, it becomes a gateway to awakening. Because what an issue is, it's really anything that keeps you out of being present. So what we're doing is we're bringing awareness to the issues in our lives, how they sit in our physical body, how they condition our energy system, how they affect our experience of being here and now. And by, talking about different issues, it was originally called the issue series, people really began to get it. Like, I see how the healing works and I see the importance of addressing this directly, because it's really by meeting something directly that we see our way through. And the through becomes a self-discovery of the truth of what we really are and finding presence. So we realized, at the end of the day, where all this work goes is not just relief from our issues, but, that, moment to moment joy that comes to life when we can really be grounded in presence. And so begins the series and the exploration, which, is coming up in terms of the podcast series that I'm doing with you, on ground events, online healings, articles, all sorts of different ways that this Finding Presence series is manifesting. And I'm really very excited about it.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. I'm tremendously honored to have the opportunity to, in some small way, to help in any way I can with this. I really love what you're doing with this. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And I love the way that we're doing it. Can I just say I love the way that we're doing it, because you and I get to talk, yes, and bring awareness. And then as part of this group, we have some of my most favorite people who are here sort of taking in what we're saying. They're ready. We'll do a question answer, sharing part where these people can offer observations or questions or whatever. And I find that really makes the dialogue so much more rich. And then after we finish here within this recording podcast, I'm going to offer this group a guided meditation and a healing to help support them with the issue that we're working with. So I think it's a really exciting format, and I'm enjoying where it's going.
Oh, definitely. And I'm so grateful for everyone who is here today. And it's been wonderful and in a little bit of a way getting to know them and just really appreciating the questions that they had on our last installment. And it is really nice to have them all in the space here with us. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you all for being here.
And then to start the conversation, I was going to ask you, regarding the subject anxiety, and I know we talked a little bit previously, about why you chose that. And now I thought what I would do, since we're all gathered together, and for the benefit of folks who will be listening to this as well as watching, if I could ask you, why why you chose to speak about anxiety and sharing that as an
Anxiety.
issue.
It's a good one. It's a really good issue. And by good issue, I mean difficult and hard to work with. I chose anxiety because, as I said, an issue is anything that keeps us out of being present. And anxiety is a fantastic example of the way that an issue keeps us out of being present. I also chose it because I have a lot of personal experience with anxiety. I know it well. I've experienced it in my life. I felt it choke me. It's something that I've had to sort of meet face on. And it can be very hard and challenging. And I find that, talking about it helps bring awareness into it. And it was the only way that I could myself meet it and help move through it and work with it, on an ongoing basis. But yeah, it's a great example of how an issue keeps us out of being present, because what we're talking about when we're talking about anxiety is not fear of the moment. Anxiety is not the moment where you're on the street and a car is coming at you and you're jumping out of the way. That's not anxiety. That is a survival response that the body needs. Anxiety is when you are worried about something that could potentially happen in the future, or processing and trying to manage something that has happened in the past, or usually a combination thereof. And that fear of whatever has happened in the past or whatever we think might happen potentially in the future becomes so great that it affects us on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a psychological level, and it makes it absolutely impossible to just be in and appreciate the moment. And when I talk about anxiety in the context of a Vortex Healing class, I will ask people who are, comfortable enough to raise their hand, how many people in the room have actually had a panic attack, not just general anxiety, but a panic attack. Usually about half the people in the room raise their hand, including myself, by the way. So I think that it's so widespread. It's important to address it. And it also sort of has a stigma of mental health. People are afraid to admit to how deeply an issue like that can really interfere with your daily life.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I was wondering as well, just dealing with anxiety, and then also it's, any connection that it may have to any other issues, that I was just wondering, in your years as a practitioner, if there's been any interesting connections that you've seen between anxiety, and does it possibly feed into other issues or its relationship? If
It
that isn't too
does. It
broad.
can be
Yeah.
very, very complicated, which is why it's so useful if you can actually keep your wits about you and track where that anxiety comes from and what's going on. It can track to other emotional issues. It can track to other physical issues. We talk a lot in Vortex Healing how issues are complicated. They don't have simply an emotional expression or a physical expression. There's imprinting all over the place. And anxiety is a great example on that. So on one level, I'll address the physical aspect of it first. On one level, anxiety for me really kicked in when I hit perimenopause. Sorry to go open with that, but
Yeah,
we're
that's all
going
right.
there.
Yeah.
Because my experience was, as someone who's always been, I think it's fair to say, tightly wound. By nature, I think that's fair. Laura is an astrologer and she's seen my chart and she knows about my Virgo nature and what that really looks like. It's fair to say I was, I'm by nature kind of tightly wound. I like to be in control. I like to, keep things organized. So that is part of my nature. But when I hit, sort of perimenopause, the body level anxiety really arose. And so it took the issues that I already had, my fear of losing control issues, all of that, and, multiplied them by 10. And so suddenly I had this, which is, by the way, an extraordinarily common symptom of perimenopause that they don't talk about. So I had this body level anxiety that just arose. And then I was looking for a justification for it, because I couldn't really track where it was coming from. I was just anxious. And so I think any one of us could look at our lives and come up with a list of things to worry about. Any one of us could justify, any anxiety that we had. But I really noticed that how the body level and the emotional connection was very, very strong. And I found, Vortex Healing is very helpful on in many ways. And I found that working on the enteric nervous system, which is the gut brain, the nerve that scientists call it the second brain. But it's really like a second emotional body. All of these neurons that operate our digestive system, that was really directly connected to my anxiety. And they also talk about how it's associated with depression as well, that working on that on a physical level helped enormously. So, that's just one thing in picking apart, because sometimes I could just feel it arise. And I thought I was going crazy. And it can sneak up on you. And which makes it worse. One example, I'll tell a story briefly, how it really snuck up on me when I kind of began to realize I had something I needed to work with. I was sitting in a class with my teacher, Rick Weinman, who's the head of Vortex Healing. And I was working on an issue. I was using my tools to dig into, a certain kind of anxiety. And I found it. There it is, right? We seek and ye shall find. And it happened very subtly. I'm sitting in a room, about 100 people. I'm sitting sort of in the front row. And suddenly the heart began to beat. And I started to get kind of my breathing. And I felt in the moment, it was this overwhelm. That's how it began for me, an incredible sense of overwhelm. This is too much. This is too great. I cannot do this anymore. And that experience of overwhelm scared me. So I had the initial overwhelm response, and then a reaction to that response, if that makes sense. And I could see very quickly how it spiraled. And we paused, class was paused, we took a break, and I put my sunglasses on and I had to, leave. And I remember turning to a friend of mine, a fellow teacher of mine, who's also a very gifted healer. And I said, can you meet me outside, down, by my room, because I think I'm having a panic attack. And she laughed. She thought I was kidding. And then she did, because she's a good friend, and she met me there, and she saw very quickly that I was not kidding at all, that by the time, I had removed myself, I was very scared. And, she brought with it, and this is Marcella, for those of you who are wondering, so wonderful. She brought, to the table, she did healing on me. And she's a very gifted healer, and she, had the high level tools. But what I'll really remember about it, and why I'm telling the story, is that what she brought was a willingness to just be with me. She just said, we're going to sit here until this is moved. And she was just willing to be with me, which gave me permission to feel how I was feeling. because I was afraid to feel how I was feeling. And that made the anxiety worse. And so being willing to meet it, and she just sat with me without judgment. She just sat with me and she ran energy, and I allowed myself to receive and just breathe. And that level of it moved through very quickly as soon as I was met in love in that place. But I realized how rarely we allow ourselves to meet and be met in love in that place where we're really afraid. So that was quite a learning experience for me, because people had talked about it. I never had that experience of how my anxiety could really go that far like that. And I learned a lot, and the quickest way to cut through that for me was to actually not judge it, and to breathe and to meet it in love, because we have a natural resistance to feeling bad, don't we? It's like, I
Oh,
feel
yeah.
bad, and therefore this is dangerous. And, but if we can feel safe enough to just allow that experience to happen, and fortunately we have tools, and thank God for them, that tracking where that anxiety came from taught me a lot about my other issues and how they sat. So it's just sort of one example of a very acute moment. I learned a lot from that. I'm very grateful for that experience.
Yeah, I'm so glad you shared that, Lorraine. And that is so interesting to me as someone who's experienced this. Sometimes it is the anxiety about not knowing what is causing me anxiety that ends
Absolutely.
up being very, very difficult, because I'm trying to track, where it's coming from, why it's happening. And it seems like it's harder to ever get to the root cause, if I can get to it,
Right.
if I'm so busy chasing reasons and
Sure.
trying
And
to
trying
analyze
to
it.
justify, and
Yeah.
trying to manage it, because it can be overwhelming, which is why, we go to management techniques. And, anxiety is strongly linked to addiction, and, what people have to do in order to just sort of get through the day. But I remember another example of my anxiety issue. It's so funny. I tell the story because it seems so ridiculous to me. It was sort of a perfect moment. It was a perfect moment. And I was spending a romantic weekend away with my handsome husband, and he was being just great, loving, supportive. We were walking in the woods, and it was snowing, and it was so quiet. And there was just the crunch of our feet, little forest creatures, Bambi and Thumper playing. Like, it was a really beautiful moment. And my stomach was in knots
Hmm.
for reasons that I could not really explain. And again, you can feel yourself trying to justify, all of the reasons you're feeling anxious. But I was forced, the moment was so perfect that I couldn't help but realize that everything is perfect about this moment, except the fact that I am not in it.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why can I not just relax and enjoy this beautiful moment? I really need to dig deep and take a look at what is holding this anxiety theme together. And I found for myself that aside from, the physical aspect of the issue, it also tied into a deep issue of loss that I have. And, loss will be another episode. But for me, I could see very quickly that a lot of what I was experiencing in terms of anxiety was the fear of losing, all the beauty that I had in my life. That I was so afraid, sometimes when you have nothing to lose.
Yes,
But,
yes.
and then there are moments where you just feel so blessed, and it's so perfect. And I could feel how my fear of losing Robert, or that happiness or whatever, just clouded that present moment. And then that was something that I would have to sort of circle back and continue to work on, if that makes sense. And
Oh,
it's
definitely.
different for everyone, of course. Everyone has different issues, but it's a good example of how anxiety reflects, other issues that we hold in our system.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. And I was going to ask you, when you're especially as you were sharing that, I feel like somewhere along the way, and it may have been a teacher or a healer that had spoken about how we can quote unquote befriend anxiety or make friends with anxiety. I don't know if that sounds ridiculous or preposterous in some way, or I'm just curious. It's kind of coming up. It's coming up in the moment. I just thought I would ask you if there's
No,
just in your experience.
I agree
Yeah.
with that, because if you're willing to meet it in love, we are so busy trying to push it away. We're trying to manage that feeling and make it go away because it's uncomfortable. And we're afraid of feeling uncomfortable because we're afraid of what it means to be uncomfortable. Like I said, we're afraid, oh, is this dangerous? So we push it away and we miss the opportunity to learn what we can from it. But if we don't judge it, if we're willing to embrace it, we're willing to bring our tools. And again, I think this is a good moment to remind everyone, I am not a doctor or a therapist, a psychiatrist or psychologist. So I encourage anyone, if you're struggling with something like this, talk to someone, get help. All we're really doing here is bringing awareness into the nature of this issue and doing it with love and without judgment. And creating a framework for how being willing to befriend our issues or meet them without judgment can be a profound healing in and of itself.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the other question I have that just thinking about where we are at this moment in history, just with so many of the unprecedented challenges that we have.
Yeah.
And I've read several places that right now, in terms of, from a mental health standpoint, that there are a lot of, maybe, and I don't know the numbers necessarily, but I just understand that it is, I've read different opinions that this may be something in terms of, I wouldn't use the phrase mental health crisis, but there's definitely been a lot of pressure that people are experiencing, and and having their mental health tested, so to speak, with a lot of the stress. So I was going to ask, just as a practitioner as well as a human being, anything that you have heard from people or anything that you might mention in terms of what we're dealing with as a culture and as a society right now, and related to anxiety.
I mean, these are difficult times. These are difficult times, and the news is everywhere. With the way that the news is and social media, there aren't any quiet moments unless you create them for yourselves. And I'm not one to believe that we should live in a bubble and just shut the news off and not be part of the world. I mean, we need to be part of the world. We need to take action. We need to engage. We just need to find a way to do it where we can be more present in it. If we are driven by our anxiety and fear, then that is what we bring to the table. And from a place of anxiety and fear, we're not really listening, we're not interacting. So the challenge is to find in ourselves, do that work. What is this really about? What is driving me? Take the, being a Virgo, I'm a big fan of structure. Having some kind of daily practice where I can tune in, give myself permission to feel how I feel, and, find that center, and then bring that presence, out into the world. And then you can see, yes, there is a crisis going on with, the way people have been living in COVID. It's been extraordinarily difficult. If we could all kind of, bring that presence to each other, we can really help ourselves and each other. But if we allow our fear and anxiety to drive us, we don't even see each other, and that's what our issues do. They create, self-protection, and they shut us down from seeing each other and really being in the world and coming from a place of integrity. So we have to feel safe enough in ourselves to, to address, everything else that's going on. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, definitely.
Say,
definitely.
Like it's such an easy thing to do. It is an ongoing life process.
Yeah, thank you. And then the last thing, I think this is the last question that at least is coming up at this moment, subject to change, but at this moment, just in terms of Anything else that you might share? I thought it was very interesting when you were talking about how, you know, it ultimately we, you know, it's coming back home to ourselves, or coming back and really meeting however it is that we're feeling, however, you know, and in whatever way it presents itself. I also get the sense that in terms of where we are in human history, that there's so many distractions available for people to, you know, if they are feeling anxiety that they're not comfortable with, there's so many choices that people can make to divert their attention. And, you know, so I was wondering anything that you might share just in terms of anything else that you might share for people who are, you know, they're hesitant, or maybe they're not sure they can trust themselves, or if they think they're not strong enough to actually befriend these things and turn back around and go back inward.
No, I think that's a beautiful point. Many of us are afraid we're not strong enough. You know, we're afraid of the unknown. You know, that's the scariest thing of all, isn't it? The unknown. I don't know why I'm so anxious. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. So to feel safe in that is an incredible challenge. And it is so easy to allow ourselves to be distracted. You know, the way that social media is these days and the connection to our phones. I remember the day, I'm dating myself, when I could get my email on my phone. And I first thought, this is going to be great. It's going to save me so much time. You know, I'm going to be able to, and I quickly realized that I had developed expectations of myself to be continuously available to anyone and everyone, you know, and I think the same goes for, you know, social media develops and all of that. There's this understanding that, you know, you're always out there somewhere. I can just send you a text, I can call you, I can email you, and you're supposed to be available. And for me, that's incredibly stressful, to be always available. There has to be time when I, you know that I can just take that time to find my center, to feel safe in what's going on. And then I'm much more effective. You know, when I'm talking to students, or, you know, or in any dealing, I'm far more present. I'm far more relaxed if I've taken that time to anchor in my own sense of presence. And so I create structures for myself in terms of how I connect with people. You know, I have students contact me in a particular way. Why? Because I'm not available to talk on the phone. I'm in Rite Aid. I can't help you right now. You know, do an email. I know that I'm sitting in my own space. I can meet you more effectively here. And everyone has their own sort of structure for how that works for them. But I would encourage, you know, creating some kind of, I'll say, practice or structure for what that really looks like for you, for everyone, because without it, it just is so easy to become overwhelmed by everything. And we have to shut down in certain places because we're afraid of seeing other people's pain, because we're so afraid of feeling our own pain.
Yes.
And so when we look at the world around us and everything that's going on, there's pain, brings up my own pain, you know, we shut down. And so if we can use our anxiety as a guide to finding out what we're really afraid of, and it sounds ridiculous, but you know, in taking a look at the things that I was anxious about, that I get anxious about, because I don't claim to be above this issue, I still work with it, and taking it to almost the worst case scenario. What am I afraid is going to happen? I had anxiety around this event. What am I afraid is going to happen? That no one will come, that it will go badly. Okay, so what does that mean if that happens? And following that through helps me to see, okay, well, whatever that is, it may be awful, but it's not really the core of my anxiety. The core of the anxiety is about that unknown. And so fleshing it out and meeting it does transform things. And that's what we do in Vortex Healing. We meet our issues and they transform, and we get more freedom and space around it. And so it becomes not just one thing or one healing, it becomes an ongoing process of meeting the places where we have shut down. And so that's what we do. And we just kind of keep going.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for everything that you shared. This has been incredibly illuminating. And I think that's all the questions that are coming up for me in the moment. So I really wanted to turn things back over to you. And I didn't know if you were wanting to open it up to any questions from our wonderful guests that are here with us as well.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, there's always more that I can, talk about. I have a lot to say
Yeah.
about this issue, but I'd love to hear from the group. If anyone has, any questions or observations or anything like that, I would love to hear from you. So just go ahead and raise a hand if anyone has anything that they'd like to offer. Denise, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. It's funny because right before this podcast, I broke my favorite mug.
Oh,
And it was kind of interesting because, there were shards all over the floor. And I all of a sudden had this moment of anxiety because I found myself not, even though I had cleaned the floor very carefully, I was all of a sudden not trusting the ground, not trusting myself that I was going to break something else. And so it was very interesting in terms of the connection also between, because you were mentioning before how different issues interface with anxiety and the issue of trust and anxiety, right? It's
absolutely.
like trusting the universe, trusting that you're going to be okay, trusting yourself. And so I just thought that was a really good image that came up. So I'm just throwing it out there.
No, I appreciate that. That's very well said. Trust is huge. That's part of what I was saying about feeling safe. If you don't trust the process, trust life, trust the divine, however that translates, you can't feel safe. And so something seemingly small becomes potentially dangerous. The shards of glass, or what you were saying. Also, the loss of something that's comforting. Just something simple like your favorite mug. I know I have my little things, a favorite mug, a little stand for my glasses. These little things help me to sort of orient, and it's so funny how losing something small with that brings your awareness to how fragile everything is, if that makes any sense. I resonate with your experience very much.
Yeah, thanks. I actually didn't think of that second part. I actually also have a question, and that is, anxiety. I feel like anxiety is a little bit more tricky than some other issues because anxiety tends to feed on itself. And so my question is, how do you meet anxiety? How do you focus on anxiety without energizing it?
This is a great question. I think first and foremost, I suggest, because I talked in my story how quickly it spirals, and it comes up, and then we have a reaction to our overwhelm or whatever it is, and suddenly it's out of control. So I think for me, in my personal experience, the first thing is to not judge the experience. Just because you're having anxiety doesn't necessarily mean that you are in danger, that you are not safe, and making the difference, differentiating between the two is huge. Giving yourself permission to have the experience of feeling anxious can sort of stop, the spiral very quickly. Okay, I'm feeling anxious. Isn't this interesting? I'm saying this easier said than done, but just, oh, okay, suddenly this thing happened, and as a result, I'm feeling anxious. What is this really about? Is this about this particular scenario that I'm afraid is going to happen as a result of this? Just in asking the question allows you to step out of it a little bit. and then you become an observer. And our issues are so much easier to work with from that perspective. Like when we were talking about shame last week, and in the intro talk was talking about the difference between, I am anxious and I am experiencing anxiety, or I have anxiety in my system. There's a world of difference between the two, because one is part of who you are, what you are. The other, it's just something going on in the moment. And when you have a little space from that, then you can start asking questions. Then you're a little bit outside of it. It can still be very difficult and challenging, but then, we have the sort of luxury of being able to pick it apart and follow it through. Okay, what is this really about? Where is this really taking me? And it becomes far more workable. Breathing also helps. I know that just sounds ridiculous. They say, just take a few breaths, and you're like, what? But breathing, and the classic alternate nostril breathing from yoga practices, that has to do with balancing the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the enteric nervous system, just sort of breathing in. Very often the gut brain that I was talking about, when you sort of Google how to work with enteric nervous system issues, they talk about relaxation and cognitive behavioral therapy and, breathing exercise, because you're working on a nervous system level. So just being able to take a few breaths will give you that moment to step out of the situation. And then it becomes more workable from there. I hope that helps. Great. Thank you, Denise. Does anyone else have any questions or observations or anything? It's a juicy issue, anxiety. Go ahead, John.
Hi, yeah, I guess in your description, I was sort of, the thing that comes up for me is like the fear of making a wrong decision, so it sort of like lives based on the past, but sort of looking towards the future, but sort of terrified of like, I'm running out of time to make, if I make a decision and it's wrong, then that's going to affect me for the rest of my life, sort of thing. And it just sort of is overwhelming. But when you're talking about the past and the future, which I know that I do this thing, and it just becomes like this sort of ping pong going back and forth, and it keeps ping ponging back and forth and back and forth, and it gets faster and faster, and gets more as I get more anxious. It just sort of doesn't stop. It just sort of speeds up, like Denise was saying. But I guess like you're kind of just saying that, in trying to just recognize, oh, I'm having a panic attack and I'm worried about this thing that's may or may not happen in the future, and just recognize it instead of just trying to fight it and figure it out. Like I can figure it out later, maybe like later in the day or tomorrow or something. Like I don't have to come up with the answer right now. So and that sort of helps me sort of deal with my
Absolutely. Anxiety. And I'm so glad you brought that up, John. The responsibility of making a decision, even small decisions, that's part of an overwhelm. In the foundational class, we have a practice to sort of tuning into our sense of the divine, and sort of asking, a yes, no, basically sort of tuning into our heart and allowing the heart and the sense of the divine that plays through the heart to make that decision for us. And I find that a very valuable practice, and however that translates in your life, but the moment to take to just sort of get centered and sort of feel in my heart what feels right in this moment for this decision, not just what I think is right or what's more logical, or what actually feels right is different from how we make decisions much of the time. And that moment of just sort of tuning in to the heart. Well, how am I really feeling? Well, in the moment, it's actually okay. It's okay. In the moment we could do this, or, we could do that, but that also helps to, just sort of step out of the drama of the story that has been created by believing there are consequences for making the wrong decision. And we all have that. And I think your way of working is brilliant, just giving yourself permission to recognize that this can be, dealt with at a different time, that it doesn't have to be right now. Life and death is not, decided in this moment. In those times where it is, you're not working from anxiety, you're actually working in a different place. That's not anxiety, that's just a survival reaction or something like that. And oddly, in those life and death moments, I found myself not thinking, just doing. That the consciousness of someone who's making life and death decisions is actually quite calm. But most of us don't stay there. Most of us are working from anxiety, and in those cases, like this, I can actually wait a little bit to make this decision. And I think that's brilliant. So well done. Well done. Thank you. Great. Does anyone else have anything? Laura, how are you doing today?
Hi, Lorraine. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for this really important to me topic. And, one of the things I was just thinking about was a time in my late 20s when I decided I was going to stop engaging in behaviors I felt were self-destructive, and what I found when I stopped behaving engaging in those behaviors, quote unquote, doing the right thing, moving towards healthier patterns, was that I was crippled with anxiety, that those behaviors were masking or helping me cope with such a tremendous amount of anxiety that I almost couldn't function. It took me a lot of developing new skills and new ways of being and getting support from various sources. And so I guess sometimes when people are like, I'm going to quit smoking, I'm like, that's great. But what's your support around that? Or what's your plan when things come up? Because I think that anxiety can be there just below the surface. And when we don't recognize it, and then when we do, that's often so incredibly overwhelming. So I guess I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that experience, because I think it's pretty common, but I don't hear folks talking about it so much. It's very
common. And there is, as I mentioned earlier, it's something to look at the connection between addiction and anxiety, as well as other issues as well, because, we reach for fill in the blank when we are trying to manage something that we're feeling that we're not comfortable with or avoid our pain. It's a very rational thing to do, to reach for something. And so it makes complete sense that when you stop using, you stop smoking or you stop drinking or you change that behavior, well, of course, that thing is right there. It's been there all along. It didn't go anywhere. It's there. And I'm not an addiction counselor or anything, but in my observation, managing that original issue, be it anxiety or fear or whatever, is an important part of working with the addiction, because that's, that's the origin of that. So being able to sort of meet that, and you're absolutely right, get support in that, whatever that looks like, a therapist, a counselor, something like that, is imperative. Because the rational response to feeling poorly is to just simply go back to that behavior. And then having had that experience and failed, as it were, trying to stop and then starting again, there's all sorts of judgments that come in with that, although there shouldn't be, we do. And that makes it all that much more difficult. So it is an important thing to look at, just how we manage that. And in the guided meditation I'm going to do with you all, it's a question I ask: how do you manage this? How do you, or perhaps avoid, feeling this issue. What does that look like? Because there is a connection. So good for you, that you saw that and you took that on. It's a very keen observation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Great. John, did you have something else, or was that your hand from before? No. Okay. No. All right. Did anyone have anything else that they wanted to touch on about this? It's such a juicy topic, and it's something that I'm gonna, I continue, like I said, continue to work with all the time. Go ahead, Andrea.
Hi, Lorraine. Related with John's question, relating with decisions, it's an anxiety. It's a big issue for me because I find that when I have to make decisions, sometimes, a lot of times, also my anxiety peaks. And then I found a coping mechanism that is procrastination. So it's not about taking the time to relax and make this decision in another better time maybe, but escaping that, avoiding that.
Yeah. Procrastination is actually a genius coping mechanism. And, we can take that time to sort of stop and get present, or we can use it in that way. So thank you for your willingness to share that. That's another way of meeting our anxiety, is just sort of putting it off. It's like, oh, I'll deal with this. When something feels too big, that is a very rational response to just, put it off to another time, and again, coming back to my observation about how I've noticed anxiety ties into other issues and all of that, just sort of seeing how making decisions became so much more scary, and anxiety provoking when I had, people I loved in the picture. When it was just me living alone, there wasn't a lot of anxiety. But as soon as I, fell in love and there were kids, and you're making decisions that not only important to you, but to your, family, and you're making decisions for other people and you're taking responsibility, it's absolutely terrifying. And from my place, the anxiety of getting that wrong, of causing pain to someone or losing someone I loved, it just became so painfully obvious that I had a deeper issue at work that I had to find some way to meet. Even now, Robert's traveling, and I'm like, oh, just text me, when you get there. It's like, well, if I think of it, no, really, I need that. Please just let me know. I think about it. I worry. It's, and I think that's human nature. I think we all do that to some extent. But finding the way that we do it, giving ourselves permission to meet it, we won't feel the need to put it off. We can meet it in the moment without judgment and work with it from there. But thank you for sharing that. I think that's very common, very common.
Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you all. This is great. This has been really useful, and I'm looking forward to, bringing this into a guided meditation and healing going forward.
Wow, thank you so much, Lorraine, and thanks to everybody for being here, and appreciate all the questions. Yeah, it's a great discussion. It is definitely a very what's the word I'm trying to use here? A very pressing topic. I may not be using the right word there, but it feels like something that is certainly part of a lot of people's lives and a lot of people's experiences.
It is, and there's probably a lot more to be said about it as well. But I think, at the end of the day, being willing to meet it without judgment and use it as an opportunity to see what else is going on, we can actually appreciate our anxiety for what it can teach us. And that presence at the end of the day becomes the master healer. So I know with VortexHealing, being able to have a little space in my system and then bring the tools to it has really sort of transformed not only the anxiety in my system, but my ability to do that going forward. You know what I mean? My ability to take that approach to anxiety as well as other issues. It's really, it's changed everything. It's changed.
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, and I love that whole idea about, what it's something that I had really not thought a lot about, and I'm so glad you brought this up today. Was, what can we learn from it?
Yeah.
What does anxiety teach us? And I see that there is that opportunity for transformation and for learning and evolution there. That it's that there is some purpose to it.
There can be, if we take advantage. Another very difficult question to ask, and it sounds very harsh. I almost hesitate to talk about this, but the question of, what am I getting out of this issue can be an important and useful question to ask. And it sounds judgmental. It sounds like, oh, we're just, trying to take advantage of a situation. But when I sat down, I'm like, well, what do I really get out of anxiety? I found in myself a feeling of, oh, well, look how much I have to take care of. Look how busy I am. Look at how many things I have going on in my life. It makes you feel like an important, responsible person. And that can almost be feeding the ego in the way. Anything can feed the ego in a way. And so just asking that question helped me see a different angle of it and my resistance to giving up my own anxiety. That, because in a way, our issues make us feel special. That's one reason it's so hard to let them go. Our issues on some level make us feel unique and different and special. And so being able to just let that go and not be attached to that really helps support the process of transformation.
Yeah, thank you so much. As always, it's always wonderful to be in this space with you, and always enjoy getting to visit with you and to hear your perspective and experiences. And just thank you so much for everything you've shared today. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. And thanks to everyone. I was looking forward to our next session. And I think that the next issue theme I'd like to approach is issues regarding intimacy.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about shame and anxiety and things that keep us out of being present. I want to sort of explore what are the things that prevent us from being intimate with each other, with the world, and with ourselves. I think that would be a great, finding presence topic and healing as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, actually, I am as well. Thanks so much, Lorraine. It's been wonderful. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jeff.